Hello and welcome to week 4, chapter 5. Skipped over chapter 4. We're going into chapter 5 and we're going to be talking about hypothesis development. I want to set you all at ease that things are pacing as I expected. I put due dates on all the special assignments and whatnot, and you sort of have this sort of disjointing quality to it of the material in the class is moving on. Learning about research methods as a topic continues to move forward, yet your substantive special assignments are still undergoing revisions. They should be behind because you're becoming experts at these things. It takes multiple tries to get to the level that I'm expecting you in this class, and I ask you to be patient with yourself and confident that at least most of the time I know what I'm doing. So I've got your back. We're making our way through these things. Lots of revisions. I believe there's only going to be 2 times in which there's going to be sort of struggle with writing type revisions. The first one, and certainly when you do your conclusions at the end. There's probably going to be some stuff in results, for the statistical stuff and how you do the tables and blah, blah, blah. But nonetheless, we move forward. You're doing fine. So here we are. We just talked about defining our variables. Now, how are we going to measure the variables? What are they? What are they measuring? What kind of numbers are we producing for our statistics? And then we move into hypotheses. I want to make the connection here. We started off with a research question. And the research question is in normal English. I'll make one up right here. What is the relationship between GPA and IQ? Whatever. What's the relationship between grades in school and intelligence? That's the research question. Very simple research question. The variables are grades in school and intelligence. There's multiple ways to measure grades in school. There's multiple ways to measure intelligence. So in my defining of variables, let's say I'm going to use freshman GPA. How well you did in your first year of college. I'm going to define that as the grades. It's different than your kindergarten grades. It's different than all your GPA. It's different than what you graduated with or whether you were an honors student or not. I'm picking it. I'm going to define it as GPA during the freshman year. For intelligence, I'm going to define intelligence. I'm going to not do IQ. I'm going to define intelligence by using another test called the Miller's Analogies test. The Miller's Analogies test is a published test. It's a whole series of questions, and they say apple is to fruit as Chevy is to what? Chevy car. And then there's 4 answers, A, B, C, D, and you have to pick the one that in the second pair matches the same sort of relationship in the first. So it's analogies. That's all the test is, and it's a measure of intelligence. So rather than IQ, we're going to use the Miller's Analogies test. So in my previous chapter stuff about defining the variables, we're going to be looking at grades as meaning freshman scores, freshman GPA, and intelligence is going to be the Miller's Analogies test results. So now we move into hypotheses. We have our question that says, what is the relationship between grades and intelligence? But we get our hypotheses statement from the variables themselves. So the hypothesis does not say there will be a relationship between intelligence and grades. It says the hypothesized statement would be there was a relationship between freshman GPA and scores on the Miller's Analogies test. You see where those definitions come into the hypothesis. So it looks very different than your research question. research question is sort of more generic. Then we get specific. And the null hypothesis, there is no relationship between freshman GPA and the Miller's analogy test. Those would be our hypotheses. When we get to the end of a project, we actually go backwards at that time. We started with generic, between two concepts, define how we're going to measure those concepts. Here's our hypotheses. We collect data. We have our statistics. We draw our conclusions as to which one of our hypotheses actually is supported by the data and which one is rejected. And then in our conclusion, we go from those hypotheses back up to our research question, because what we've collected is a version of an answer to that research question. It's not the only answer. It's not the definitive answer, because we've chosen certain ways to measure our variables. So here we are at the stage where we're looking at defining those variables. For your particular assignment, you're going to have to get by defining first, because those definitions are going to have to appear in your actual hypotheses. So that's why we're taking these steps the way we are. Now, for Chapter 5, it also introduces you to the notion of reading peer-reviewed literature. And in the discussion, we're going to share our challenges with reading the article that you actually chose to replicate, or the one you were inspired by, the challenge of reading these kinds of things and beginning to think about the various factors associated with the phenomenon you're interested in. And that comes up in the quiz again. Now, one of the sad things about the way so far that I've done this assignment is you do not have the advantage of having done a literature search yourself. You're looking at an article that has already done the literature search, and you're going to base your study on that. The first question in the quiz asks you, why is it important to have a clear understanding of your topic? You get that when you conduct the literature search. When you're looking at all the background, you become knowledgeable about your topic and the different ways it's been explored, the different ways people have defined them, the different studies that have been done. You start getting it's like in your head. You can really understand the concept. When I did my own research, and the research I do now, I look at what the social nature of online learning is, and that concept is deeply rooted in my understanding of those concepts. And so I can speak relatively eloquently about them. I know my stuff when it comes to stuff I've done the literature search on. So you don't quite have that because you're really basing this on one article, and you're taking their summary, their literature review, and you're going with that rather than have read all those other articles that they refer to. So the question asks, why is it important not only to have your, of course I just said it's important to have your head wrapped around it, but if you're going to go in and design an original study, why is it important to do that literature review? There are many, many, many reasons for that. I want you to capture that. I want you to capture why it's important. The second question, we're going to be looking at two-tailed tests versus one-tailed test, and that has a lot to do with how you write your hypotheses. When you write your hypotheses, the way in which you write them determines whether it's a one-tailed test or a two-tailed test. And essentially, one-tailed, you're only going to be examining changes that occur in one direction. Two-tailed test, you're examining changes that could go either way. And statistically speaking, a two-tailed test is a higher bar. It's a higher bar to reach significance, because that 0.05, if you're using that as your level of significance, actually gets divided between the probability of either direction. So we're not looking for something that's better than 0.05. We're actually looking for something that's better than 0.25, because it's separated in each. So it's actually a higher bar. that the amount of change or the amount of difference or whatever has to be further to the right or further to the left on the standard bell-shaped curve in order for us to arrive at statistical significance. The importance of the one-tailed two-tailed test is going to come down to statistics and that decision making that we have. However, it is defined in the way that you write your hypotheses. So, for question number 5, I want you to write a hypothesis that the two statements, I want you to make something up. Maybe you'll do your study, take a stab at it, but I want you to write a hypothesis statement, the experimental or alternative hypothesis, and the null hypothesis. I want you to write that and tell me whether it's a one-tailed or two-tailed test. This gives me the opportunity to not only determine your ability to recognize how hypotheses generate the decision as to whether something is one-tailed or two-tailed, it also will give me some notion as to how you are writing hypotheses and what's important to be in them, that it's not your research question, it's the variables. You have to be very specific about that. Particularly in quantitative research, you have to be specific that your hypothesis is talking about the variables you're measuring and how you are measuring them. Right there. That's where those comparisons lie. You have the ability to make one up. You have the ability to search the web for some, but you're still going to have to demonstrate to me that you can write a hypothesis and determine how that hypothesis decides for you, basically, two-tailed or one-tailed. It's up to you which one you want to demonstrate. So, I've already made note that in the next version of this class, everyone's going to have to come up with a one-tailed, and everyone's going to have to come up with a two-tailed, so you're getting off a little easy this time. So that's the quiz. The special assignments as we're going along, and people are still working on one, then I hope that as you're ready with your consent form, and then that should be a little quicker, and then start working this week. As you're waiting for the feedback, work on defining your variables, which was from last week's content. You're defining variables, and what the heck? Start working on the next one, which is your hypotheses, because you're defining your variables. Don't include those in the assignment yet, but be working ahead even though you're experiencing mastery before. Don't worry about the timing. Don't worry about the due dates per se. It's just where you should be thinking is a little bit ahead of your assignments. There's a little bit of lag there. It's exactly what I'm shooting for. Is right now you can be both working on mastering your first and second special assignment while at the same time you are writing out the definition of your variables and how you're going to measure them, which will be the next assignment, and the hypotheses, which is the next assignment. So there should be a little gap between those. All right. So that's it for this week. I look forward to connecting with you folks about any questions. Please reach out. I know I have to set up a couple appointments here with people to help with the next phase and things. And things are going exactly as planned. So even though it feels a little off sometimes, it's what I expected. So take care, even though the weather is kind of crappy. And be well, and I will see you next time.